Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Timothy Sanders. I'm trying to practice to make a blog for myself that deals with freight trains. Um, I have a game called Train Sim World 2. It happens to be my favorite game. Um, my favorite, I have several of the collection. Right now, my favorite is still Sandpatch Grade CSX. Uh, the blog that I'm making is not intended to. I don't have any train experience. Never driven one in my life. I'm just a relatively new gamer as well, and I'm also very new at making YouTube videos. This is going to be my first attempt at a blog that deals with freight trains. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you like it, please subscribe and smash the subscribe button and give me a like. But also, you're welcome to give me some criticism if that's what you feel you need to do. Again, I'm just learning. But Sandpatch Grade is my favorite. It was a railroad that belonged to CSX. It belongs to CSX currently. It was part of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Originally, when the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was built starting in 1828, they had to get their what do I call that? Sorry, I'm trying to think here. Their charter ratified by Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia in order to start construction. So in the process, they had to compromise with Pennsylvania, who refused to ratify the charter unless the Baltimore and Ohio declined to send a line to Pittsburgh from Cumberland. Well, later in 1875, the Baltimore and Ohio bought a smaller railroad it was called Connorsville, Pittsburgh, or something like that, that connected Cumberland to Pittsburgh. And this is the line that's now called Sandpatch. We're going to start with fully fueled. It's my favorite scenario because you get to do distributed power. The video also has a lot of beautiful scenery. I love this game because it has such gorgeous scenery. We're going to go to continue journey. I'm going to come down here to freight engineer, and we'll go to fully fueled. I don't play much of the passenger services, mostly because I love freight. The new Horseshoe Curve game is now out, and I like it too. But I haven't gotten used to it yet. Okay, here we are, fully fueled. This is Cumberland Yard. We got a little bit of a frame issue here. We may need to restart over.
Before boarding Q015, these GP38-2s must be attached to the rear. Climb aboard and move them to the classification yard where Q015 is waiting.
The details in this scene are just overwhelming. And you have all kinds of things to look at here. First thing I'm going to do though is get in the trailing engine. And we're going to set that up as the trailing engine for the distributed power as well as for the objective. Each objective, the game is basically formed around objectives. You start out with a scenario. We're going to controlling with unit at either end. I'm going to isolation is set correctly. We don't need the radio on, so we're going to turn that off. I don't think local control has as much bearing on these engines as some of the other ones. So I'm not going to mess with that. Actually, let's just turn it off for the heck of it. I like to have the number lights turned on. It just makes it look more realistic. The next thing we got to do is turn the stand off. And so that's done. The MU2A valve should already be set to 620, trail 626, and it is. At first I didn't agree with the way Dovetail did that, because it's what essentially happens is that if you don't realize that you need to set the MU2A valve to anything, and the trains don't run right. You have them both set to either lead or dead, or if you have them both set to trail, the engine will not function properly. But since I've learned to appreciate it for a very good reason. You can always know that both engines are set to MU2A, so all you have to do is set one to lead, and the other one's already set. Now you have to turn the control stand on or off, so you have to enter the engine irregardless. That's something they might want to think about, either having the control stand turned off, which is the recommended way to have your control of have it set up properly. But as I pointed out, everybody's different. Everybody wants to do it differently. Okay, that's set to freight. This is going to be set to release. We got that set to lead or dead. We're going to blow off some steam there. And set that. We're going to start rolling even without the throttle. But we're going to engage the throttle because, again, it says objective based. If you don't meet the objectives, you can't proceed on to do the game in the sequence that they've got it set at. I'm going to keep it going about 6 miles per hour. I don't want it going too fast or too slow. As I get better at controlling the train, it's easier to stop it, so I will allow it to go a little faster. But what you don't really want to do is get to where you overrun the switch here, which I'm going to do. Maybe. Nope, I guess I made it. Okay. There's two ways to throw your switches in this game. You can either go to this map and hover over the switch in question, push A, or you get out and walk up to the switch. This one is as a three-way, so you gotta go, it's down, up, middle, and then it's down again. So that will take care of that. Technically, the engineer, when he's on a train by himself, technically the engineer is not supposed to get out and do any of that. But for me, it's part of the fun, the immersion, they call it, of being a railroader. I tried most of my younger life and adult life trying to become a railroad engineer, but never made it, never got hired, and so I became a nurse instead. And now I can enjoy trains in my own living room. Ever since I was a little boy, I either went down to the tracks and watched trains with my dad, or I stayed in my room and read books about it, played with model trains. But I've always had a love and fascination with them. My Uncle Russell Jolliffe, he worked for the Illinois Terminal Association in St. Louis. It was kind of like the Port Authority in New York. And they controlled all rail traffic in and around St. Louis metropolitan area. Now, he started out as a road crewman in 1933 at 18 years old and retired as a switch engineer. I don't remember what year that was. But the man told me every horror story that he could think of about working on the railroad. I think he liked to watch me cringe when he would tell me about men getting run over by trains or getting their heads cut off by dirty cars. The door was jammed, and so they opened it and it came back. They looked inside and the door went and caught their head off. I've also talked to some of my patients that were former railroad employees. Talked to a man that was part of the Chicago, Eastern Illinois, CE&I. It became MOPAC and then became Union Pacific now. The engineer told me about a story about a friend of his that had got fired because when he was shunting car, when shift was switching cars, he hit a car with a combine on a flat car and knocked the combine off. Instant firing. In the manual it says that you can couple with these cars at 5 miles or less and you won't derail the train. I watched a couple of guys on a CSX video. I think it was in Florida, and the conductor's outside the train on his radio, and he's telling the engineer to move up gradually to the train, which is what I'm trying to do now, to imitate what they were doing. And they coupled the train this way. So it was a very gentle I actually try to watch videos to learn how to do it the way engineers really do it in the real world, because I want to be I want to make this as much as I can make it about real trains. I mean, this is not real, it's a simulation, but that's what makes it more fun for me, is that it can be more realistic. Okay, it wants me to put this to full service, so I will. It wants me to put this to cut out, so I will. Turn the bell off, I'm tired of listening to it. It wants me to put it to trail 6 or 26. And finally, we're going to move that to neutral and turn the light off. So this now locomotive is now ready according to the game. Okay, if I leave it like this, it will not work as a distributed power. So I'm going to turn the MU2A valve back to lead, turn this back to freight, and turn that to handle off. That will work. That will work for our purposes. The number lights are turned on. That's turned on. And make sure we have the radio turned on still. Yep, we're good. Okay. Now let's ride like the wind. And one of these days I'm going to buy software that will allow me to do some fancier stuff with these. But for right now, please bear with me while I run along the train here. Nobody would do this in a real rail yard, I don't think. Too dangerous. My ankles turn on ballast anyway. When I walk on the tracks, they tend to not be very stable. My ankles don't. So I would not be running like this at all. And here comes another train. That's what I love about this newer version, the souped up version I call it. They have a lot more train traffic. And again, we're going to go to the trailing engine first to set it up. I have a good friend that works for the Union Pacific, and he said that that's what you're supposed to do, is to set the trailing and distributed power up first rather than the lead, which they want me to go in the lead engine. But if you don't have the distributed power on the other engine, the trailing engine set up correctly, when you get to the grades around Hindman, you will basically be trapped on the grade and you won't be able to move because they're just too steep. 1.5, 1.3 grade, percent grade. And this train will just sit on that hill and spin, and you won't be able to get nowhere. Okay. These are SD 40-2s. I think of all the engines in this game, I think this is my favorite. It has just enough of the older engine to it, but it also has the newer gadgetry. It makes it a little bit easier to work. We're going to turn the number lights on. I'm going to do from either end. Radio should already be turned off, and it is, so that's all that needs to be done there. If any of you guys out there are real railroaders and you see things that either I could do differently or could add, please feel free to put that in the comments, because I want to learn. I'm 53 years old, so there's little chance that I'm going to go work for any of the major railroads now. My time for that is probably past. I'm diabetic. Besides the fact, I really kind of like being a nurse, so I would rather stay with that. You don't have the issue. You don't have all the issues with layoffs that you do on a railroad. Lead or dead. We're going to set the cutout to freight. I talked to a guy named DJ Trains. He's a really good guy. He says he never heard of banking com, but in the game you have to turn it on to help. It's supposed to do whatever voodoo it does. And turn the lights on bright on the front, and turn the rear to dim. I turn on everything. I don't, or most anything I can. Okay.
We're operating this westbound stack train today. No doubt it's packed with all the latest gadgets and gizmos. That extra traction you attached? Well, we've been asked to take it up to the summit for work in the area. There's a shortage of engineers today, or someone would have run them up independently. This is Q015, requesting a track warrant from Cumberland Terminal to Sandpatch. Over.
Q015, subject to signal indications. Proceed from Cumberland Terminal to Sandpatch. Over.
Q015, subject to signal indications, proceeding from Cumberland Terminal to Sandpatch. Out.
Okay, Q015 is going to be sitting for a few minutes. What we're going to do is I'm going to set the independent brake to full application. This here is for the air cylinders on the engine itself, and these are for the cars. And I have to wait till that gets to 89% before I can move this train. Now, another thing you can do in this game while you wait is look at your switches and see what needs to be. Okay, that one right there needs to be thrown. I could either do it now with the A key or stop the train just short of it to perform the same deed. Okay, and we go to the next switch, and sometimes it's a little aggravating, but right now we're doing pretty decent. Those are set right, set right, set right, set correctly. In a lot of cases in the yards, they would have men that would go out and be switchmen and throw these switches for you, so that you didn't have to stop the train in order to. And that one's got to be just before the crossing there. You've got to throw that switch. Okay, so we're going to do this by manual, and we're almost to the point where we can roll. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the steam there, take off that brake. It's my understanding in the yards that it probably works different for different railroads, but the general theme is that the bell works. Bell is on. We're now to 89, so here we go. And if your distributed power is set up correctly, it should run at notch 2. If you can't get it to go at notch 2, you got a problem. It seems to take a few minutes for a few minutes for this to start up. Good. And we're moving. All I'm going to do is make sure that it's going to be not just a flash in the pan here. These things do malfunction even in the game, and you can actually lose your I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Just I welcome y'all to my blog. You feel free to send your comments to say what you would like to see different, or we can talk about on these train excursions. Two things I won't talk about here are politics and religion. When you first meet a friend, you don't want to talk about either of those subjects because everybody has a strong opinion about that and everything. This will keep this apolitical and a-religion and not discuss religion. Otherwise, everything else is free, gratis. Prefer to talk about trains and stuff while we're doing trains. I mean, that just makes more sense. And I want to keep this kids friendly. There's so little of things today that are friendly to our kids anyway. So I do want to keep it kid friendly. If you overrun the switches in this game, unless you have it set in the settings to derail on the switches, then it won't. But again, part of the challenge is to make this as true to life as it can be. Looking around here, you can see that there's a lot of potential issues that make this not quite so realistic. The number of railroad cars in this yard for being a major hub is sorely lacking. There's no other train activity to interfere with yours. There's nobody walking around or doing anything here other than you to worry about. There's no traffic to speak of. This must be on like a Saturday or something when there's nothing going on. I interviewed for the Union Pacific Railroad back in 2008, or yeah, 8 I guess it was. And these two black gentlemen were the guys that are going to be interviewing us, or talking to us. And the first thing, they were sitting in this boardroom together. They both look like there's somebody that could be football players or basketball players, either one. Look pretty hefty. And they say the only constant in transportation is change. Well, nobody knows that they're supposed to repeat that. So nobody did. And they say, we're not going to tell you again. So everybody repeats with them, the only constant in transportation is change. So they proceed for the next several hours to tell you every horror story they can think of that might change your mind about working for the railroad. Because they want you to, if they're going to come and work for them, they want you to stay. They don't want you just to leave. So they want you to know out front that, hey, this is a very rough life. My wife and I could not have afforded to go without a paycheck. The thing that came down to was the paycheck issue. They told us they withheld your first paycheck. Your first 4 weeks you don't get paid. And then at the you get your first paycheck and it's held for first 4 weeks, it's held back. You don't get it till later. I didn't feel that my wife and I could have survived without a paycheck. Now, I later learned that you get paid for training, and you get travel, you get travel, you get your food, lodging while you're on the site. So that would not have been a problem if I had known that. Because I was assuming I was going to have to pay for all that stuff without any income at all. Not to mention also help my wife stay with, with food, and shelter, and so forth. The scenery here is beautiful. I mean, Cumberland, Maryland's a city built on the mountains, my mom and dad and I traveled to Baltimore to see my sister, and we passed through Cumberland. It probably was around 6 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark because it was in the autumn. And the way the streets were, it's like they were on a mountain. You were like there would be a stop sign at the end of a steep downgrade or upgrade or whatever. And it's like, my gosh, if you're like got snow and ice on this, it would be very difficult to drive and stop. The other little kinky details they have out here, like the ties, the gravel, the contrasts. I'm sure people would argue this is not as good as it could be, but for me, it is perfect. I love the effort and the expanse that they've put into this game. You can see where the sun is sitting on the trees there. The lights. The HUD over here tells you a lot of information. It's like a little tram on a flat on a line, and that's your grade. Right now we're at 0%. If it's slanting down forward, you're going downhill. If it's going back, it's uphill. It gives you a visual representation. The round circle, of course, is the speedometer. Gives you a digital readout of the speed. Right next to that is the indicator for the reverser. We're currently going forward, so it's facing forward. There's a little, looks like peach colored dot that's marking about 15 miles per hour. That's the top speed that's allowed for this train. If you go over that speed, you will be speeding, and they will take away 15 points from your action points until you decrease your speed. And if it gets significant, they don't get any at all. What I understand from my friend Leon Thurman is that if you're over the speed limit, you're by 1 mile, you're over the speed limit, and that can be potentially harmful to your career as an engineer, because they're very conscious about safety. I like to look at the train from the inside because, well, I mean, for all my life I've been able to watch them on the outside coming past me, but I've never seen the insides of them, so I like to stay inside the engine. I do like to look back and see, like this scene here where you have, you can see the cars following behind you. And we're going to blow our horn. In the old days, there used to be calls for just about anything and everything that you can think of. There used to be, like, I don't know how many there were, but there were a whole lot more. There's only 3 now. The one I just did was for the railroad crossings, but I think also the bridges are supposed to get the same horn. You give a long, short, and long. And that last long should at least, you should occupy like the crossing or the bridge that you're blowing at, is my understanding of that. Again, please, if I'm wrong, someone can please let me know that, because I want to learn. I hope these little pop-ups are not showing up on my, if they are showing up on my screen. I have no control over those. I'm not happy with them either, if they're showing up. Because it's actually fully hiding the HUD, so you can't even read it. My eyes are bad, so I can't really see that well. It's the dial for the actual speedometer on the engine. The GP38-2s have it this and I like that, but this one is kind of harder to read. And then this is the I want to call it altimeter, but that's not what it's called. But anyway, it tells you if you're braking or power. The green is power, yellow is braking. If you're going 3 feet a minute, it's going to show that, or 6 minute feet, whatever. You're gaining speed. Some of these you can't even access. The stop lights are on, ditch lights are on. Some of these you can't even do. They won't tell you what they are. It's very basic. I mean, you don't have everything here that you can possibly mess with. We're now on a grade of 0.5%. So I'm going to up it to notch 2. We're getting ready to enter a speed zone of 15 miles per hour, which we're already going at less than that, but still you want to be aware of it because it comes. We have a whistle post. I'm thinking this is for the station itself. instead of having the cathedrals like we used to have, they have a lot of these train stations are just like little buildings that you pretty nondescript, not much to them. Okay, we have a switch up here. I'm going to take it down to not 0. This switch is okay. I do this scenario so much, I remember exactly where it is that I need to slow down. The fact that I'm going on an upgrade is also going to help slow me down. And I'm going to, rather than risk the overshooting it, which I may do anyway, but oh. Came closer that time. Okay. Throw the switch. It's ready. While we're sitting here for a minute, letting you can, the really neat thing about this game is you can fly and look at your train from any and every perspective that you can think of. What I like to do is go back to the distributed power so I can periodically look at where it's at in relation to the rest of the train. The details, like the cars driving over Winnebago there. I mean, there's a lot of Winnebagos in this town. A lot of school buses too. But it gives it a really homey look, and it really, I mean, it just adds to the realism. The only unfortunate thing is that nobody crosses the crossings. In reality, there would be somebody crossing, even a rural crossing at some point. But no cars or trucks ever venture across the crossings that you're going across. When the game was first out, they had it set to where the gates never even went up. They just stayed down. Getting close to the distributed power. Containers are interesting. I grew up with the piggybacks, and I love those a lot more than I do the containers themselves. But even that is a revolution in itself, railroading. Oh. We're moving. We don't want any going backwards. Well, for some reason we didn't stay with the engines back there. Okay. My conductor's gone. Okay. We're going to head off in the... Too long means forward. Too long blast is forward. And then when we get to the crossing again, we'll I like the details and the graphics where you have all the I don't know. It's used to it allowed you to actually sit on a certain part, or some of these it still does. Allows you to stay where you left off. But today it's not doing that. If you guys prefer to see more of the outsides of the train, do let me know, and I will be less skimpy on showing it. This blog is as much about my audience as it is about me. So I want to make this interactive and fun for everyone. And that gate is not gone down. Not even turned on. Okay. If you look at the cars, a lot of times you see that they're actually the same vehicles over and over again. And if they're going over a grade crossing that's along the side of your train, I've actually noticed that they will go through the grade crossing rather than over it. While these little pop-ups are happening, I don't mess with the controls. I just let it go at the original speed. Upcoming, we have the junction. It'll have there'll be a little light. Either it's going to be lunar or red. If it's red, then obviously we're going to stop. If it's lunar, then we can continue on. Kind of lonely here now without my conductor. You know, we had so much to talk about. Okay, these tracks over here have got a little bit of a different speed limit. That is all red, so that would be a stop on these two lines on that bridge. And we have lunar, so technically that's a restricted speed. And if I was to do it exactly the way a real railroad did it, I would just simply stay at below either 10 or 15 miles an hour until I got to the next signal. But the game doesn't even count that as part of the... You can still go at that speed at 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, whatever they're saying you can go. Those are what they call dwarf signals, and they're also absolute, which means if you fail to stop in time, it's adios muchachos. Your job as a railroad engineer is over. Now I'm just about to overspeed because I'm not paying attention entirely. We have a 0.7% grade. So I'm going to turn it down even more. I'm going to notch it down a little bit more. Say about 15 seconds before the crossing. Now, technically, when you see those mileposts, I'm also assuming that you would be... oh, the bell is on, but the bell is not playing. Interesting. If anything had to malfunction, that's pretty much fine there. We have mileposts, just a stop of it. But I'll let this roll just a little bit. There it goes. Now it's going to work. Turn it off for a few minutes, give that a break, give us a break. You know, it's annoying when people start trying to sell you something while you're playing your game, and it's blocking your ability to see what you need to see. Doesn't tend to want you to embrace them. We got a train coming in. And it's the coal train. Get some throttle back on. Heading out into the country. The mountains here are just beautiful. It looks like fall colors there. The trees are turning colors. Sorry, I get to fidgeting with that little dot in the hut on the middle. And I kind of like to have it, for whatever reason, I like to keep it right there in the middle of the tracks. Something to play with while you're driving. I'll notch it up to notch 2. So we're now at a 3%, 0.3%. And our speed limit just went up to 20. The train has evidently entered the speed zone completely, so now we're able to increase speed. So I'm going to up it a little bit more as we get ready to get to the Cumberland Narrows. We're up to notch 4. We accidentally skipped 5 and we went to 6. But generally the recommendation is to go 1 notch at a time and then wait to see how much, wait to give the chance to add speed to your general progress, because sometimes if you add 2 or 3 notches at a time, it will jump your speed so much that you have trouble controlling it. I mean, you actually go over the speed limit. Been there, done that many a time. And some of these controllers are super sensitive. Either hit it too hard and it jumps to you or more, or you don't hit it hard enough and it doesn't even move at all. So we're going to glide it down a little bit and I like to keep it at least a couple of miles per hour slower than the speed limit, so that you're not as likely to go over. A little bit of automatic brake in there to slow it down a little bit more. Then I'm going to creep back up a little bit. Trying to keep it about 23 to 24 as much as possible. Cumberland Narrows. .9% grade. Beautiful countryside. The textures, it looks like the water's kind of moving. These signs are hard to see. Another YouTuber pointed that out. I thought it was just my eyes getting bad, but they are hard to, you don't really stand out real well. It might be room to improve that, make them bigger or something, so that they are easier to read. Oops. Throughout a lot of the trackage, it seemed like there's a lot of fences. I know with the original Baltimore and Ohio, they had fences because their original intention was to use horses as their motive power. And the fences kept the horses inside on the tracks, basically. Often the canal was also the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal was close by. Kept the horses out of the canal as well. Turn that off for a little bit. That just looks beautiful. We're an hour and 4 minutes into the video. We're not even to Hyman yet. We have a green aspect up ahead, which is proceed. There's 2 blocks are clear, no diverging switches. Maintain track speed. As a little boy, I always loved the sound of the train diesel engines roaring down the tracks. My dad, he kind of reminded me of James Garner, the way he styled his hair. My dad was also a quiet, mild-mannered person. Um, we would sit and talk about all kinds of things while we waited at the tracks to see the train. Sometimes we saw several, and sometimes we saw none. Just depended on the circumstances. So I can't really see what the hell is going on. Sorry, excuse me. So I can't see what's going on with this pop-ups. I just went ahead and slowed down a little bit. Oh, for pity's sake, come on. The day of the pop-ups. Some of the... I'm down to 47 miles an hour. That's not too bad. Go back up a little bit. We have a green over red aspect. So we have a proceed. Saying the next two blocks are clear and there's no diverging switches. Frames kind of fell a little bit there, and we had a... That happens. Seems to happen for a variety of reasons. For one thing, my computer, when it's been on for a while, tends to have starts to get a little wonky anyway. Pardon me. We have a, looks like yellow aspect up ahead. Until I clarify it, I'm going to go ahead and just start throttling down the train. We should be getting close to Hyman. Actually it's a yellow over green aspect, which means we continue at current speed for this signal. But the next signal, there's a possible diverging switch or something, so that you're going to have to prepare to slow down. Well, it's not particularly saying I have to. I'm going to start the process because sometimes it's just harder to slow than it is anything else. Getting really close to Hyman, which is the first. Well, Ellis is the first town, but Hyman is the first major town that you have along here that you really see. We have a yellow over red, which means approach. So we're going to slow the train down. It's basically telling me that the next signal could be red. Impassable. I don't know whatever happened to the grade crossing. I guess I overlooked it while I was in the speed zone there. This should be Hyman coming, be the next one coming up actually. It's in the far distance, Hyman is. It would be Hyman, Pennsylvania. Cumberland is the only city in Maryland that's on the sand patch route. The rest of them are in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. Maybe Ellis is also in Maryland. I'll have to look that up for sure, but give it just a little bit more throttle. And be prepared for the possibility that we're going to stop. It happens. You'll have a red signal up here on occasion. Hyman is the city, is this little town, right? Oh, come on. You gotta be kidding me. Over this console, it is very difficult to see what's going on over here. Usually you respect for the railroaders that drive these things, because I mean, you would think you could see really well, but you can't. And we have yellow. There's a little railroad park here, and if you look on the, you actually watch a video that talks about Sand Patch, you'll see this, at least one of the cabooses is there. And if you look at the Google Maps satellite image, you'll also see a caboose there. It is a plaqued one, but the indication, of course, is approach. So the name is approach. So all we're required to do is slow down. We got the nice bridge here. Tracks are going to change up here, the speed zone. But with the combined grade and it's better to me, it's better just to slow down and try to rebuild your speed a little bit. Because if you have to overkill, it just kills it and you just stop. You get a brake penalty and the train just completely stops. Nice thing about the HUD is it stays out there and you can see it no matter where you're at. We're an hour and 25 minutes into the video, and we're somewhere in the wilds of Sand Patch. We're past Hyndman, but not to Fairhope. The terrain is just beautiful out here. I mean, couldn't ask for better scenery. We have a approach. Yellow approach. As I was saying about containers earlier, when I was a kid, you know, they had containers then, but they were on a flat car. And the way it worked out, the flat cars, you could not stack them because the containers would be off of the center of gravity, and they would also potentially hit bridges, signals, and so forth along the way. So a BNSF workman actually came up with the idea of the well car, which shifted the center of gravity closer to the rails and allowed for stacking. I think at their height, I read somewhere that there were 50,000 trailers that railroads used to haul freight. There's two theories of thought, trains of thought about that. First off is that the Eisenhower's enactment of the Interstate Act in the 1950s created a boom for trucking, and so the railroads wanted to cash in on trucks as well as they did on trains. So they made the service a combination. Let's say you have a widget maker that has no railroad access, but he wants to haul his goods across country, principally by train. So he asks Illinois Central to send him a piggyback trailer. He fills his trailer with widgets, and then the driver takes the truck to the nearest terminal, and it's loaded onto a flat car, transported across country to another destination, say St. Louis, and in St. Louis it is taken off of the flat car, put back on another semi-truck, tractor trailer, semi-truck, and then taken to his distributor, say. There is also photographic evidence that farmers that wanted to send produce to market would simply load their wagons full of produce and put the entire wagon on a flat car for the same purpose, that now it's already loaded, it doesn't have to be unloaded into a different wagon. He can take his wagon to the market and sell his goods. We're going to notch down and we're going to slow because we have a red. We have an impassable block coming up. Try to do this without overkill. Put an initial reduction, but if I have to, obviously you can do emergency, all the way to emergency. I'm going to keep it kind of going as best I can here, but slower. We'll get closer to the signal before I'll actually stop the train, but I want to make sure I'm going slow enough that I'm not going to overshoot it. As you get too close and your train will, oh, that's going to go yellow now. Okay. I have overshot these before and passed the signal at danger, and the game is over. or this mission, or you have to restart again. But since we're now past the danger, we'll just keep on going. The containers have the same versatility, but maybe even more so. Piggyback trailers can, I guess, could go on a ship too, but these containers are made specifically to be hauled on ocean-going ships. So essentially, it can stop in a port like Los Angeles, unload it from the ship, put it on a train or truck, whichever the shipper wants to do, and then haul it. According to the statistics I had read, there was 6 million containers, but there were only 50,000 trailers at any one time. So the significant difference is a whole bunch. And so the railroads needed something they could carry double stacked, and so they created this well car. The Baltimore Tunnel, is my understanding on the CSX, but it's not on this particular part of the line, is unable to accommodate double stacks, so it has to be single stacked. It can only be single, but still, for the most part, they're able to double stack them, and means they can carry more per car. I had read that if they could have, the railroads would have continued to use boxcars for everything. They actually hauled cars in them. They had big enough doors they could, in some of these boxcars, they could actually push a car into it. Not exactly the most practical way to do it, but they were determined that boxcars were going to be the answer to a lot of things. They also have, the one thing I would like to see on this game is to have a flat car with like a load, pipe, farm equipment. It would also add to the potential difficulty of the game, because you would have to be more careful coupling them up. I'd also like to see gondolas introduced into the game, hauling pipe, steel, whatever loads. A lot of times they held trash. I know in Centralia Centralia used to have a dump right there next to the tracks. And the Southern, particularly, would bring in gondolas, and they would load it up with garbage, be hauled somewhere else. Scrap metal mostly. These some of these roads you would not necessarily expect a lot of traffic on them, but the one thing about having traffic going across these crossings would be that you can see better where the crossings are. At least in this scenario, at least in this sand patch, you do have the whistle posts, where in the Canadian National Oakville you don't even have that. So it's a little bit more difficult to see them. But even at that, there is no traffic going across them. That's something I think they could improve the realism of the game by having cars going across, trucks. Not that they necessarily need to let you hit them or have people that are running the gates, but at least, you know, it makes it more realistic looking. And you have cars waiting at the crossings rather than just driving away. If I'm going to go across the crossing, I don't care if the train, I'm not going to turn around my car just because I don't want to sit there. Doesn't happen. I don't really think you can legally do that anyway on most cases. You just have to wait. But when it came time to spending time with my dad, it was just about the idea that we got to spend time together. Looking back on it, I thought to myself, you know, it didn't matter whether I saw a train or not. It was because I got to see my dad that I loved it. Here's the Fairhope Bridge tunnel. Inside the tunnel, this tunnel, you can't see anything except for my ditch lights. You would think with the powerful lights you'd be able to see the tracks ahead at least a certain distance. You can't. That's something they can improve for realism in this game, is to have the lights more functional. You look at a train coming at you at night on this game, it's not really seeable like you would think it would be. Because I mean, I've watched trains come at me from various parts of town and so forth at night, and you can see that those lights are a long ways off, and the lights will light up a certain about 100-yard stretch of the tracks ahead of the train. You should be able to see them, see the tracks at least, signs and so forth. But when a train meets, when you meet a train, their lights are just barely able to be seen, even in the dark, in this game, and that's not realistic. I've played other simulators, but I cut my teeth on this one for all practical purposes, and I love it. There's just something about the graphics, and the gameplay is reasonably accurate to me. Again, I'm not an actual engineer, so I can't say for sure, but it looks real enough. And I like the graphics and I just think there's things that they could do to improve it. But beyond that, it's a beautiful game. You try to keep because as you're moving through here, you'll have periods where the grades will change, and so you're constantly fluctuating, because the fluctuations will make your train go faster in certain places, and they'll make it go slower in others. You also have the, I don't want to say rabbit or egg hunt, but it's a kind of like that. You're supposed to find posters, hard hats, those snow markers, and there was one more thing. Anyway, you're supposed to walk along the tracks and find all this stuff. I could just imagine an engineer carrying an armload of posters so that he can put up 25 posters, pick up 25 hard hats. Some of them are in really inauspicious places. I've only found 81 of them, of the posters. I've only got 81 of the jobs done. Not being able to find all of the different ones yet. But for the most part, when I'm riding the train, I just drive the train. I do separate where I can walk around and stuff, do those little chores. You need to see better, you can push it forward and it helps you to see, magnifies it. Or you can fall backward and it just basically allows you to see it from a further perspective. There's another one of the Winnebagos. It actually looks the same as the one that was in. I don't really ever see any difference in them. They're always the same. Saves on memory, I guess, but it just gives you something else to look at. It makes it more realistic. You see cars along the tracks. That's pretty cool. GTA and games like that, they have a lot of variety, and so you would think they could do the same with this. I don't have any affiliation with Dovetail, CSX. My experience of driving this train is simply from the perspective of the simulation, not Never driven a real train. Now they got bulletin boards. When they asked me if I wanted to turn that on, I said yes, and I've never turned it back off. Because, I mean, realistically, you do have bulletin boards along the way that will try to sell you things. I can't say that I actually pay attention to them or read them that much, but it makes it adds the realism to the game, because you actually would have boards like that along the way advertising things. I work as a nurse. Since I was 21, I've actually worked in some capacity in the medical field. I started out as a nurse's aide. Did that essentially for 16 years, and then became an RN. I started doing monitor tech job, watching EKG monitors, and I thought, you know, I'm going to have to take the responsibility for, might as well get a better pay. So I went back to school to become a nurse. And I worked 13 years for Good Samaritan. And then I went to, now I'm at Salem Township in Salem, Illinois. And I love Salem. It's a really small hospital, but it has a lot of heart to it. Like, well, DJ Trains is one of my favorite people on the internet talking about railroads. There's others, but I just don't remember their names offhand. But DJ pointed out that he's not going to make comments about his company because he does not want to bite the hand that feeds him. And people may want to know about nursing. I'll tell you about general things. I'll be glad to. If you have questions, just put them in the comments and I will read them. And I'll answer them in a new video. But I will stay away from the politics side of my business. I don't, and I can't disclose personal information about my patients, or actually even the company for that matter. That's a HIPAA violation. Health Information Portability Act. Would lose my job. So obviously I would not be able to talk about specific cases or anything like that, but if you have general questions about nursing or want to know something about it, just drop me a line. I love to teach people, love to talk about my job. I like talking about trains too, but I'm not as knowledgeable about them as I am about nursing. I also have a son. His name is Matthew, and Matthew is the best thing that ever happened to this daddy. He's the apple of Daddy's eye, and he loves trains too, just like Daddy does. When he was first old enough to talk, my wife let me have him at noon, and I took him back to my home in Centralia And in the base, at my home there, you're a mile away from the tracks no matter which way about a mile, any way you look at it. Well, on a cold February day, it doesn't really matter because the train will sound like it's still in the basement with you almost. The vibrations and all that will somehow makes the sound appear even, it's almost like you're next to the train. So he heard the train horn and he says, "Choo choo," and he points toward it. And it blows the horn again. He says, "Choo choo." I said, "Yeah, if you want to go watch the choo choo, let's go get my daddy's keys and your coat and we can go watch it." So he ran upstairs as fast as he could go. And at one time he even actually got my keys for me. And that, at least for that particular instance, we did not see the train. Whether it was just a yard train and was not moving, or I don't know, but we never did see it. And then he'll say something like, "Well, Daddy, is the train sleeping today?" Don't know. We'll see. Southern was the most common train that I saw growing up. Norfolk Southern now. I'm part of Norfolk Southern Corporation. They move through Centralia at a snail's pace because they have to go over the interlockings and so forth. The Illinois Central / Canadian National, if you aren't at the tracks, or Amtrak even, if you're not at the tracks when they start blowing their horn, you're not going to make it in most cases because they're flying they're actually moving at a really high speed, most of them. So you rarely ever see them. But Southern, you can usually catch them. My nephew Charlie, he's also my buddy, and he was born ill. He was very sick, and so they taught him sign language the first part because he had cerebral palsy and he had trouble speaking, so they taught him sign language, and he would do the more in sign language, and he would say this. It sounded like he was saying this way, and he's pointing in both different directions, so it's like you're going this way and that way. So one day he was younger than Matthew's age. He was only about 4 or 5. He just started to walk. And he heard a train and he said, "This way, this way, this way." He's pointing more with his fingers, like he's pointing both directions at the same time. And I say, "You want to go this way and that way, Charlie Bear?" And he said, "No, this way, this way." He starts pulling me toward the train, toward the tracks, which is a mile away. So we start walking down there, and we get down to past the junior high, and you see the tail end of the train. You missed it. So I decide to just continue on walking down there. Heck with it. So we get down. Actually, I thought I heard another train, and I thought, well, if it's the same train, the acoustics are just bad, and I have the same train, and that's okay. No big deal, no harm done. Well, we get down there to the tracks. We get about 10 feet from the tracks, and here comes Conrail. There was another train behind the other one, and he's got car carriers. My nephew would get my arms, and then he would wave at the engineer and smile. And then he wanted down, and he would pull me back so many feet. I would pick him up, holding. He would, repeat that process until basically we got all the way back to the street. And this was a small field. This was a small playground, so we went quite a distance. I adore my nephew. He is he's still my buddy. I still think of him as a brother versus as a nephew, or even a son. And he used to call me. He used to try to get my attention when I'd come home from nursing school. He'd start yelling M when he couldn't talk, kick his legs and flail his arms, and if I didn't come pick him up, he got mad. I have a lot of fond memories with my son too, Matthew.